All right, everybody. So there's this website, this publication called Bounding into Comics. The vast majority of you have probably never heard of it, but those of you guys who have are probably cheering right now at the fact that I'm going to be talking about it. Bounding into Comics is a reactionary nerd media site run by this guy, John Trent, who is a very unsuccessful, quartering, no bullshit clone anti-woke YouTuber. And much like the articles on all of his, or on his site, are all about how insert thing has gone woke and it's bad, that's the same type of content he does. And he recently put out a video that I feel like is sort of an all-encompassing piece to talk about this general viral drama. This is the right's desperate attempt to defend themselves against the massive storm of dunking they've been getting on them for the viral meltdown of heels versus babyface over pronouns in Starfield. You see, they've basically gone full-triggered SJW over Starfield, and it's made the rest of the internet laugh at them. And that's really what decides who is and isn't winning the culture war at a given time. Who is and isn't freaking out the normies. And right now, the right are freaking out, and that's freaking out the normies. And that's kind of a dub for the left. People like Heels vs. Babyface making an embarrassment of themselves has been kind of an optical win for us, and I could not be happier to see that. But Bounding into Comics, the guy behind it at least, made this video, and it's all about defending Sargon's defense of Heels vs. Babyface. So I feel like we're going to get kind of a all-encompassing defense from the right here. So I couldn't think of a better video to react to on this than this one, of course. So let's just hop right into it. I'm not going to delay, any longer. Let's go.
YouTuber Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad, recently shared his thoughts as to why gamers such as Heel vs. Babyface, aka Az, are rightfully angry with Starfield and its injection of woke politics here.
So what they've been calling it over and over again, like in comment sections where they defend, so I've got like in my comment section, people have been defending Heels versus Babyface. They keep repeatedly referring to the inclusion of the option to pick your pronouns in the character creation screen as an injection of politics. Because to these people, they've been convinced that pronouns themselves are a political topic up for debate. And so when you include them into a video game, you are essentially including something that denotes that you're on a certain side of that political debate. What most of the people who are backing these grifters don't realize is that there is no debate around the validity of trans rights or the validity of pronouns. Most of these people literally say, I hate pronouns, and not realize they just used a pronoun in that exact sentence, right? That is legitimately how lacking in self-awareness these people are. They don't even know what a pronoun is. But the people who are spreading this, the grift, the people who are just bullshitting to make money, they know what they're doing, and they know what they're saying is bullshit. It's why they can't even answer the question, what does woke mean? You hate woke stuff a lot. You're always talking about how bad wokeness is. What does woke actually mean? Can you tell me? Can you give me like a solid answer to that question? And they never have one. There'll never be a solid answer to that question. These things are annoying. So yeah, when they say that, that's what they mean. It is an unsubstantive critique. It means nothing. When they complain about the inclusion of this pronouns option, they don't realize that they're the ones who need to make the case for why the inclusion of the pronouns option is a bad thing. One of the most common arguments I've heard from them is that it's pointless and it doesn't matter. So its inclusion is bad because the only purpose it serves is to indicate to the player, I guess, that the people who made the game agree with progressive ideology, while on the same hand they complain that it's a big deal. It makes no sense. What's very clear is that they do not like trans people. They don't agree with the scientific consensus on gender, pronouns, sex, or trans people, or any of that stuff, and they see anything that signals a validation for trans people or the science that validates them as an attack on them and their politics, and they're offended. Like they're just offended. That's all it is. They are offended that a piece of media they like has signaled support for politics that they disagree with, and so they become offended because conservatives, much like how they accuse the left of being, are massive snowflakes who can't handle dissent from their own views. It's why they insist that there not be any separation of church and state, for example, because despite the fact that it's unconstitutional to join those two entities, they disagree with that political philosophy. And so despite the fact that it's massively hypocritical for them to advocate for this, they advocate for the merging of church and state because there's no honesty there. They just, much like many other people, but they seem to do it the most, they just argue based on emotion.
So if you don't know what has been going on, there's been a clip of a stream from YouTuber as of Heel vs. Babyface where he ranted about Bethesda Game Studios' inclusion of current-day politics into Starfield. The clip was shared by Dan Vask. And
it's crazy how much their language has started to singularity itself, you know? Like, at this point, they all use the same buzzwords. And that was a big sign that the anti-SJW skeptic genre was dying out back in the day, when there stopped being any uniqueness to the content as a whole. Because if you guys remember, back when the original this era of politics happened online, you would basically get every single day the same lineup of YouTubers all talking about the same story or video or whatever it may be, but with like a different like spin and personality. But they're all making the same arguments, all very dumb arguments with no substance to them. But they were funny, at least, generally, and they were quippy, and so they stuck with people, and they would get repeated as if they were original thought by people who'd heard those arguments. And once those arguments started to become just the same thing over and over again, current day, SJW, Mafreeze Peach, and everything, the anti-SJWs basically Flanderized themselves. And people started to notice, and when these people would say their talking points, it started to become less of a compelling argument they were making, and more of like a joke. Like, you guys remember when these arguments that were once like compelling arguments that radicalized people started to become like ironic memes that people would recite? Like, even in popular culture? Because once it becomes like an obvious enough dialogue tree, which it has started to become, the magic of the grift kind of wears off, I think. And that's what happened before in large part as well. Also, isn't this Haste 2 nice?
And in that clip, as says Bethesda, there is nothing I love more than to sit down, comfy chair, turn on my PC, fire up a brand new RPG, lose myself, think, OMG, just think of this world, just think of all the planets I can visit, all the immersive...
Well, he screamed it. He didn't say it like this in like a balanced, measured response. He screamed at the top of his lungs, looking like a soy jack.
Things that I can get involved with, all the fights, all the relationships, all the people I meet, all the places I go. I'm so excited to go there. And then he questioned, and do you know, I love nothing more, with all of that laid out in front of me, I love nothing more than to be dragged out at every effing conceivable opportunity so you can effing current day us. Sorry, did you want to get immersed in our world? Well, then guess what? Effing pronouns, effing gender ambiguity, effing current day Californian crap. Because that's all we effing know, because we're boring, we're so effing boring. We can't see past our own effing reflection.
The fact that all of these grifters are coming out to defend this guy, like Sargon, Bounding into Comics, all the chuds on Twitter, are coming out to defend this guy, and meanwhile even the chuddy normies are calling out Heels vs. Babyface for how cringe that was, really goes to show how willing to die on the hill of like owning something woke they're willing to do. Because if they let up on something like this, then they look weak to their audiences, but much of their audiences aren't as radically attached to this ideology as they think. Most of their audience only believes this shit because they've been convinced by them. And so a lot of them end up locking themselves into the dumbest positions that they just can't back down from, and dying on the dumbest hills because they can't back down on something they've claimed and said they won't back down on already.
That's the level of our narcissism here. Bethesda Western Game Company. He then continued mocking the company. He said, F your immersion, F you having a good time, F you falling into a world and just getting lost. No, 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 current effing day.
Also, conservatives who are homophobic telling gay people that them existing is like selfish or narcissistic in some way, or just self-serving, and you should be like ashamed of it, is literally nothing new. Homophobes and conservatives have been doing this for a very long time. It's just like now they're doing it on the internet, and like charismatic, extraordinarily overpaid pundits are the ones saying it. Via like TikToks and YouTube shorts, but nothing's changed in that department. This has always been a thing.
He then directly addressed the company saying, F off, you're boring, you're effing dull, you have nothing to say, you're a one hive mind waffle. That's all you effing are. And you wonder why people are getting so effing sick and tired. You take everything we love, all our immersions, all our fantasies, all our escapism, and you just can't help shovel your dog crap, effing crap ideology into everything.
Remember, guys, I need you guys to remember just like a few years ago when the response to people like Anita Sarkeesian or any feminist or progressive game critic or movie critic or whatever critic was make your own games. Make your own games if you want them to be woke or whatever. And now it's they can't leave our stuff alone. And it's like, well, yeah, people in Hollywood and in the games industry are woke. Like, your ideology of bigotry and hate is not popular. You try to delude your audience into thinking it's popular, but no matter how much you try to say this, it doesn't make it true. It'll never be true, no matter how much you try to speak it into reality. And so you can't, like, lose your mind and have a confused meltdown every time reality doesn't match your delusion. You know, it's the same thing these people say to trans people. Yet they don't realize it applies to them more than anything. It's blaringly ironic.
Every single solitary effing thing. Richard Masucci of YouTube channel Review Tech USA reacted to this clip, writing on X, I'm jealous, to be honest. I want to live in Heel vs. Babyface's world where life is so easy that pronouns and the character creation screen cause me to rage like this. Obviously, appears that he's definitely trying to mock as from heel versus babyface.
Everybody
for
is.
The obvious hyperbolic clip that he shared during
literally
the live
all of his
stream.
videos are him melting
now you can
down over
criticize
things
Az
being
for
woke.
his hyperbole, but I think what he's saying does have merit to it, and so does Sargon of
Yeah.
Akkad. And Sargon of Akkad went
Soften
on to
the
explain that
blow.
heel versus babyface's rant was
Play
not
damage
really about
control.
pronouns, but rather an agenda aimed at white men to humiliate them for their skin color. This is what he said.
What?
He said, it's not really
What's that
about
have
the
to do with
pronouns.
white
Pronouns
people?
are just a symptom of the
So for those that don't know, by the way, Sargon of Akkad now is like a fully open white nationalist. So most of his like content these days and most of his rhetoric these days is about how like the left is trying to like destroy white men, specifically white men. Like he's all about like trying to protect whiteness and like white majority or whatever in Europe and in the West. Like he's gone full white nationalist now. He's not like classical liberal skeptic anti-SJW anymore. He's like full on moved to intellectual dark web, radical Nazi. He's like I've seen him argue in favor of like white ethno-states.
Pervasive corrupting force of social justice continuing to humiliate white men for the crime of being white men. It's everywhere in the real world, and now it's in his escapism, which he paid good money for. Why should he not be angry? The entire philosophy is built on a series of lies and requires us all to commit to its lies or face punishment. We are supposed to clap for men winning women's sports, approve of diversity hires who put people's lives at risk, and believe the media when they tell us white men are the most...
Yeah, so this is a new conspiracy theory the right has started drumming up, and it actually started... I mean, it didn't really start, but it kind of evolved into its current form. While I was on my trip to Washington with Demon Mama, I did a segment about it while I was on the road in the snow, actually, an outdoor like phone segment. This conspiracy lie, I was actually like, I was able to watch it kind of like grow. This AI generated, or not AI generated, it was actually footage from Microsoft Flight Simulator. Footage of a plane crash came out, like a plane flipping upside down and crashing. And it was posted on Twitter and went mega viral with the claim that the pilot was a diversity hire from like some new law that required a certain amount of pilots to be like brown or something. And it got, after a few days, hit with the community notes feature saying, this is Microsoft Flight Simulator footage that's been blurred, not real footage. But since then, the right has unironically been using that video without directly referencing it, since it has been directly debunked, but they, are still like sort of subtly referencing it when they talk about this, as claiming that like the diversity hiring is getting people killed. They're referencing that fake Microsoft Flight Simulator footage that went mega viral in the conservative space on Twitter a few months ago, of the plane crash. So remember, guys, everything, even the anecdotes that these people base their ideology on, is bullshit. They are allergic to the truth.
Group in our countries. The agenda is not incidentally aimed against white men. It is openly prejudicial and explicitly targets and demonizes them every single day from the most powerful pulpits in our societies. An evil will has infused itself across our civilization, and it demands we recognize
Nazi
it
shit.
as good.
Nazi
every day
shit.
every day we are lied to by people who know we know they are lying, and yet they feign outrage and turn us into pariahs if we speak up and say that they're lying. It's unbearable, and they expect us to pay for the privilege. He then concluded, that's why heel versus babyface is angry, and I don't blame him. So I don't think he's alone in this assessment. YouTuber Academic Agent posited a similar thing back in 2020, that actions like the ones Bethesda made for Starfield were part of what former KGB agent Yuri Bezmenov described as a demoralization campaign aimed at Western society.
Jesus Christ, dude. Oh my god, they're huffing high-strength retardium, dude. For those that don't know, like KGB agent who worked for, I believe, like the Soviet Union, who is like a loved figure by far-right people, because his whole thing was like, I am going to explain to you how the evil communists are going to try and corrupt civilization into becoming communist. They want to destroy Western civilization through its culture, and I'm going to tell you how. And that was basically that was basically his whole thing. It was he was like, what's that one bitch's name? The lady from North Korea who says, in North Korea they shoot your dog and fuck you in the ass with a spiked dildo every day before you go to work in the morning. Who's that one lady? Yamoni Park? Yes, thank you. Like, he was like the Yamoni Park of Soviet Russia. Pretty much. That is essentially 100% the case, and I did not misrepresent the scenario at all there. That's pretty much his thing. He was basically a right-wing anti worker conservative, like, astroturfed grifter
back in the 1980s. So if you're not familiar, Bezmenov explained this demoralization campaign employed psychological warfare techniques to, quote, change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite an abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their family, their...
Mind you, these are the same people who, when you actually confront them in a debate, such as Ben Shapiro, the clips of Ben Shapiro getting confronted on this are always the funniest. When you confront them on, okay, so you say that it's, like, obvious and reality disagrees with trans people and, like, facts versus logic, but why does every single mainstream, like, psychological, medical, and academic institution agree that gender and sex aren't the same thing, that there's more than two genders, and that, like, trans people are valid, and that, like, hormone blockers are safe for minors to take, etc.? Like, why do you disagree with all of the medical consensus? And then they'll, like, stutter for a few seconds and say, well, you see, these big medical organizations have been pressured by the woke mob into, joining with their ideology, and so if they went against it, then they would be canceled into oblivion, and so they basically have to agree with you, otherwise you would cancel them. It would basically be his response. So they unironically fall back on alleging conspiracy of, like, a woke takeover of academia in response to you pointing out that, hey, you keep arguing that all the facts are on your side and all the studies are on your side, but when you actually look, they aren't. What's the deal with that? Their response is just to say, oh, well, I didn't mean those studies. Those are all corrupted. Those are all, incited by the far woke left or whatever. So it truly is just a conspiratorial, deranged worldview that they have.
Their community and their country. He elaborated, saying it's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism, Leninism, ideology is pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the.
Yeah, so this is from like the McCarthy era, from like when you could get like arrested and given a life sentence and seen as like a traitor to America if you were a communist, which is what all these people support. These people will like argue in their videos where they try to like epically own the left, that the left is authoritarian ideologically and doesn't want like white men to be allowed to exist or whatever, while like actively defending policy that like made believing things that they disagree with illegal. Like they're literally just everything they claim the left is. All conservatives have is projection. They're not the most creative people, so all of their like attacks on the left are just apt descriptions of themselves.
The basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. So the academic agent would take these comments a step further and note this demoralization and psychological warfare were actually focused on creating an original sin for target nations to make them more pliable. However, not only did they create and push this original sin on the various nations, it has now been unified. These various original sins have been unified in what he describes as the concept of whiteness.
So this guy's a Nazi. Well, so is Sargon, but like this entire sphere of people are either like grifters pretending to be Nazis and trying to please Nazis for the money, or full-on Nazis. Like this is just straight up like the cultural Bolshevism, like full-on like Nazi conspiracy theory, like not neo-Nazi conspiracy theory, like OG Hitler, Goebbels, Germany 1940s Nazi shit.
He says if the original sin of the Germans was to be able to be the Holocaust, each other country would find its own original sin. In Britain, it was the empire and colonialism. In America, it was slavery and racism. All of these things have coalesced into one unifying concept called whiteness. And for the re-education program finally to be completed, of course, the symbols of these things must be destroyed, or else the new mindset cannot take root.
So what he's trying to do is say, like, look at this, way back in the 80s, this guy predicted the woke takeover. And it's like, the civil rights movement, like, famously was going on in the 60s. Like, the Stonewall happened in the 70s, I think. So, like, all of these super progressive, like, civil rights movements to make, like, gay people, like, you had, like, first wave feminism with, like, the suffragette movement. Like, some of these things predate the Soviet Union and communism as a whole. So how is Marxism or communism the source of, like, feminism? Like, it makes no sense. It literally... actually, no, suffragettes were after the Civil War, and, like, that was... I know for a fact that the Civil War was post-Marx, because Marx and Abraham Lincoln wrote to each other. So that's one of those, like, bizarre historical, like, they happened at the same time things that makes you go, really? Like, Marx and Lincoln were at the same time, huh? Marx was also at the same time as the Industrial Revolution in England, which actually makes a lot of sense. That one actually, when you think about it more, makes a ton of sense. Of course, Marx would have been like, that was like the perfect time for him to be around doing Marx, was during the Industrial Revolution.
So if you were to extrapolate that, the argument would be that Starfield is clearly trying to demoralize people in Britain, Germany, the United States, based on these kind of various different things. Various different things. Clearly, the pronoun usage.
You realize what this is, right? This isn't them making an accusation. This is them making a confession. They feel demoralized by this. Popular games that are like the game of the month or whatever are coming out over and over again, and they're like wins for the left. They're games that like very clearly denote there is a cultural shift in this artistic medium much more sympathetic towards progressive values and like the rights of minorities. And that is a massive L for the right, because this means that far more young people especially, and normies just overall, are going to be exposed to progressive values outside of the hyper strawmanned misrepresentations the right desperately wants them to be getting exposed to lefty values through. Like the right, if they could have it their way, no one would ever be exposed to a progressive's words outside of paraphrasing from a conservative commentator responding to those values. Like they would never want you to actually like seek out a progressive's video and like listen to their arguments on their own and just hear what they have to say. Like conservatives rely heavily on an echo chamber.
I think is another thing there too.
And an echo chamber has to be enforced.
That would be part of like, oh, you're being too white because you think that there's male and female, and that's how God created us. That's a white idea, and that's how they would attack that, and that would be.
Okay, so they're straight up saying that transphobia is a white idea, is what he just said. Transphobia is a white. That's actually like almost the kind of shit I expect to hear from a Twitter woke scold. Funnily enough. It's that deranged. It's always funny when conservatives get so, like, they're so desperate to try to make an argument, they end up saying something that's like woke scold shit. Or maybe woke scolds are just basically no different than conservatives. They all think with the same backwards, dumb logic, essentially. Could be either one, or both. God, these...
Your original sin, that's a white idea.
Guardians.
That's a white thing. You see this in headlines, like they'll even say like white adjacent Asians or the white thinking black man and stuff like that. You see that from like I don't know, like I want to say like the New Yorker,
nothing,
or like the Atlantic, outlets like that.
Literally
that
nothing.
Stuff. But this is indeed, I think, what is going on, and Starfield is a part of that. Whether or not they realize that they're a part of that, they have kind of.
Isn't it crazy how like? Just for example, I can actually think up off the top of my head in this unedited, unprepped, pre-watched format. I can think up of multiple examples relevant to the argument that I'm trying to make that you can literally, like, I give as much detail as I possibly can to you guys so you can look into it yourselves and do your own research beyond what I tell you. And I can just do that off the cuff, off the top of my head, because I am literally aware of like several studies, institutions, and stories that back up the arguments I'm making. That I don't need to like this guy can't even list one off the top of his head. He literally can't list one because there's so little sincerity. He doesn't actually believe any of this shit. He doesn't actually care about genuinely informing himself on these issues to try to like round out his understanding of this stuff and improve his knowledge so he can be a more effective arguer for his ideology. He truly is just a grifting piece of shit. And that's why nothing he's saying is even compelling on a conservative worldview level. I'm gonna have to repair this pickaxe soon.
Bought into this whole ideology that says that being white is basically an original sin, or this idea of whiteness, concept of whiteness is an original sin. It must be eradicated. And I definitely think the whole transgender ideology.
So, like, it's funny because they're the ones saying the left wants to eradicate white people, but meanwhile, you literally have conservative politicians advocating for the quote-unquote destruction of transgenderism. Like, they literally want to wipe out transgenderism is the words they'll use. But meanwhile, they're the ones saying that, like, the left wants to just, like, wipe out whiteness. And the reason why they use such harsh language to describe what trans people supposedly want to do to them is because it justifies what they are planning to do to trans people as being, like, self-defense. They're trying to preempt a self-defense claim for the horrific political policy they're going to be pushing and advocating for, voting for, and no doubt passing all across the country. Yeah, Michael Knowles, for example, said he wants to see transgenderism eradicated with a demon smile on his face. That, like, ear-to-ear, like, nearly the troll face grin that he does. He said, I'm not going to stop until transgenderism is eradicated, I believe he said. No penalization by YouTube, by the way. That is saying you will not stop the content you're making until transgenderism is eradicated. YouTube has no problem with that, apparently. No problem at all. It's fully allowed.
Has been kind of coalesced into that concept as well. So let me know what you think. What do you make of Sargon of Akkad's assessment? What do you make of this connection
Cringe.
that I'm making here between Vesmanov, Sargon of Akkad, and
also
Academic
cringe.
Agent? Do you see this pattern? Do you see this happening in our television, movies, and obviously we're talking about video games? Our video games. Let me know in the comments below.
Subscribe for more.
Isn't it crazy how lacking in any substance these conservative grift videos are? Like, I feel like I sometimes I feel guilty for how relatively low effort my content can be due to it being live streamed unprepared off the cuff stuff. But then I look at your average conservative like pundit and realize that literally none of them put in anywhere near as much work as I do for my content. Like, I actually like dig around the internet on my own, find topics, do the research on like what's relevant to that topic for me to make good arguments on my own. Like, sometimes my editor helps me find stuff, but I still have to like know the knowledge off the top of my head that is relevant. All of these conservative pundits are always wearing an earpiece where they're getting fed lines from their like massively stocked and prepared like media team that's like sifting through websites and papers to like feed them arguments so they don't have to think up an original thought on camera, so they don't have to do any like real-time edits or anything. It's really lacking in any substance, and it just makes you feel grim for the future of politics. But I really do see this stuff being on its way out pretty soon. I feel like people are getting pretty fed up with it.